I have another Mighty Marvel Masterworks to review today. I've reviewed a couple of these on this channel already. These are reprints of classic Marvel comics in a small and portable edition. So just to illustrate the size here, this is a different publisher, but you get the idea. This would be like a full-size comic, and the Mighty Marvel Masterworks is just a fraction of that size. So the disadvantage is the art is smaller than it would be on the full page, but the advantage is you can pick it up and take it with you just like you would a paperback book and read it on the go. So this one is the Fantastic Four, Volume 2, subtitled The Micro World of Doctor Doom. So to answer the obvious question, why am I starting off with Volume 2 instead of Volume 1? And the answer is the same as it always is with everything I read here in Vietnam. This is what was in the bookstores. So I'm living and working in Vietnam, and my access to English books is limited. When I first moved to Vietnam, English comic books were almost impossible to get a hold of, but they are becoming more available for whatever reason. They are stocked in some of the international bookstores now. So the one I went to, Phahasa, if anyone lives in Vietnam and recognizes that store, had Volume 2 in stock. Not Volume 1, but Volume 2. So we're picking up with Volume 2, which is starting off from the Fantastic Four number 11 in 1963 and going to the Fantastic Four number 20 in 1963. So the first 10 issues are not in this edition, but I've actually read those already some years ago. Years ago, when I was studying at the University of Melbourne, they had the Marvel Essentials in their library. And I got the Fantastic Four Marvel Essentials number 1. I checked that out for a couple days and leafed through it in my dorm room. Although it was so boring, I only got about halfway through it, and then I just gave up and brought it back to the library. Yeah, I know. But I'm back for more here, even though I never made it through the first volume. That was before I had started the project of, that was years ago. That was before I had started this project of reviewing comic books on this channel. So I didn't stick with something just for the sake of reviewing it. If it was boring, I just stopped reading it at the time. Now, I know it's a little bit heresy to say that the Fantastic Four is boring because there's so much mythology around the early issues of the Fantastic Four. And I'm going to briefly recount that mythology. And if you're a comic book fan and you already know this stuff, just skip ahead in the video or bear with me. You'll have to forgive me for this, but I'm going to recount it briefly. So comic book superheroes were popular during the 1940s, what's known as the golden age of superhero comic books. But they went out of fashion in the 1950s. Comic books stuck around, but instead of superheroes, it shifted to other genres. It was westerns were popular, funny animal comics were popular, monster comics were popular, horror comics were popular, etc. Romance comics were popular, but superhero comics were not popular. And most of the titles went out of print. Now, the big ones like Batman and Superman, they never went out of print. Sorry, out of print is maybe the wrong word. They stopped publishing them. The magazine stopped running. Anyways, the minor superheroes like the Flash and the Green Lantern, etc., their magazines just stopped. They weren't popular enough. And then Stan Lee and Jack Kirby over at Marvel decided to give superhero comics another try. They had been writing various westerns and monster comics at Marvel during the 1950s. and wanted to give superhero comics another try. So they launched Fantastic Four, which was so successful that they did a lot more superhero comics, and it ended up starting off the whole silver age of comic books superheroes, the new age of comic book superheroes in the 1960s. And after having success with the Fantastic Four, they went on to create everything. Spider-Man, Thor, Ant-Man, the Avengers, the Incredible Hulk. They did it all. They created all the Marvel superheroes. With a couple exceptions, the Submariner and Captain America. Captain America isn't in this volume. Those two were pre-existing from the 1940s, but everything else they created. And because they were having such success over at Marvel and revitalizing their superheroes, DC was able to revitalize their superheroes over at their company. So DC was able to relaunch The Flash and the Green Lantern, albeit in slightly different forms. And DC started the Justice League of America. So the Fantastic Four caused a revival of the superhero genre in both companies. But it was particularly infamous for launching the Marvel superheroes. And what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby are credited with doing in particular is introducing the idea of angst into superhero comics, or giving these superheroes some sort of everyday problems or weaknesses, or a hook to grab the reader, some sort of something that's relatable, or something that they want but they can't have. They did this across almost all of the Marvel superheroes comics. But for the Fantastic Four in particular, there are a few different hooks in here. At least when we pick them up from issue 10. Ben Grimes is the Thing, but he's not happy about being the Thing. He's being turned into a monster here. But that makes it very hard for him to interact with society. So he desperately wants to return to his previous state. And Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, is working on various cures to try and cure him. But of course, nothing works long term because you got to keep that hook there. As for Mr. Fantastic, he is in love with Sue Storm, who's his girl from a long time ago. But Sue Storm, let me see if I can find the relevant panel here. Sue Storm is conflicted because... Sue Storm is conflicted because she is in a love triangle with the Submariner. So here they are recounting their history. She says, "Please read. Let's skip over that part of it. It's rather painful for me." That's just it, Reed. I know how you feel, and I don't ever want to hurt you, but there's still the shadow of Submariner between us. I understand, my dear. So that's an ongoing one. Also, Ben, the Thing's girlfriend, is blind, which is fitting because he's a monster, or has a monstrous appearance. So I guess it takes a blind girl to fall in love with him. The Thing is constantly looking for a cure for her blindness, which is the plot of issue 19 here, where they go back in time to try and find a cure for her blindness. But the cure doesn't work. And here we have, they're all comforting each other here because she's still blind and they haven't found a cure. And here we have a classic Marvel ending. No, every incident in life doesn't have a happy ending, and this is no exception. So again, the angst in superhero life. And even the antagonists have a bit of angst to them. the Submariner, who is one of the antagonists of the Fantastic Four, although he's more an anti-hero than a true villain. He is looking for his people, the underseas people, who at first he can't find them, then he does find them, but then they abandoned him, and so here he is at the end of this issue. Am I to be a king without a kingdom? A man without a home, more than a sea creature, yet less than a human? Is there never to be a place for me on the surface or in the sea? But destiny moves in mysterious ways, and the saga of the Submariner is not over yet, as we shall learn, blah, 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 blah. I guess that's what these issues are so famous for doing, is introducing this famous Marvel element to the genre of superhero storytelling. And I do recognize that this was apparently groundbreaking in its era. But, yes, when I tried to read these years ago at the University of Melbourne, when I was reading the Marvel Essential Collected Edition, I just couldn't get through it. I just found it so boring. Yeah. Let me start with the positives first. I've already talked about some of the positives, which is the little hooks that are given here. Although, I don't know, some of these hooks are better than others. Like Sue Storm being in love with the Submariner is a little bit silly, maybe, but okay. The other thing that made the Fantastic Four apparently so revolutionary in its day was that they were a team of superheroes, and they were kind of a family because they all had interconnected histories. Mr. Fantastic and the Thing were old college roommates and war buddies. Sue Storm and Mr. Fantastic had been dating for a long time. The Human Torch is the younger brother of Sue Storm, etc. So they're a family, but they're always squabbling with each other. And some of the scenes here where they're having some of their squabbles, the characterization is good, at least in some of them. Let me see if I can find a good example. All right. So here, the Thing is studying here. The Human Torch is playing a joke on him. So he's sending in his heat to heat up the Thing. The Thing is trying to get some work done, but he's getting so hot. And I just got me a hot seat. I just got me a hot seat. Aha! So you're the wise guy. And so they're fighting back and forth between each other. And especially considering the era in which this came out, I think an era in which superhero comic books, superheroes in comic books just did not have much of a personality. These are kind of fun, identifiable personalities they have here. Now, the weak point is Sue Storm, who is throughout these comics portrayed in such a dated way. And I mean, I know it's the early 60s. So, like, part of me is like, okay, well, it's the early 60s. What did you expect? Like, everything was sexist back then. But the other, the other part of me sometimes forgets how sexist things were back then, or sometimes I tend to think some of that is exaggerated a little bit. But rereading this, I mean, it's not exaggerated. When people complain about how the media was very sexist back then, it's not exaggerated at all. You can see that reading this. So, I mean, here's Sue Storm, who is just a cliche of stereotypes, a walking cliche of all the bad tropes of women. So she says, "Oh no, look what they've done. My clothes, my expensive Dior and Saks Fifth Avenue dresses, ruined. Look at them. Sob. Don't sue. I'll make it up to you, honey. You can't read. They were all original, exclusive creations. Sob. Men, you're all beasts. And that's just one example, but this is just all the way through. Sue Storm evaluates Min's trustworthiness on how cute they are. So when they meet Ant-Man for the first time and they're not sure whether to trust him or not, she says, "Oh no, Reed, he's much too cute. I bet if he were normal sized." Sigh. And then, yeah, she's also in love with the Submariner for reasons that don't really seem... I mean, the Submariner as he's portrayed in these issues certainly does not appear to be, to me, to be very lovable. But what do I know, huh? Oh, and look at that artwork on her face. There's a few different panels where, I mean, I know I've gone from complaining about sexism to complaining about the artwork, but I don't know if Jack Kirby had a problem drawing women. Look at that face. Yeah. Anyways, so okay, Sue Storm aside, who's not a very well-written character, the rest of them have good personalities, and the banter between the Thing and the Human Torch is always good. Well, let me see if I can find another. Oh yeah, here's one. So they're out relaxing on vacation. The Human Torch sees monsters in the ocean. And then he runs back and tells the Thing, and the Thing's chair collapses on him. He's like, Ben, quick, there's some kind of monster out there. Where? Ow, blast that stupid folding lane brain contraption. So, you know, the Thing is just this really strong guy, but so clumsy and always getting himself into these situations works, I think. I think that's all very charming and makes these characters very memorable. Okay, now I'm going to say maybe a couple more nice things before I get into my complaints. The concepts for these adventures are good, for most of them. So I'm going to complain about the execution in a bit, but the basic concepts for these are pretty good. So the micro world of Doctor Doom, where they get shrunken down to this micro world where there's a mini kingdom in there, that's fun. With the Submariner is a little bit trying as an antagonist, but this issue here where he refines his people and there's all this drama among the Submariner's people. Release my hand, Krang. I must go to him. Wait, have you forgotten your vow? You are pledged to become the bride of Warlord Krang. No, you cannot hold that to me now that Namor has returned. My true love has come back. So, you know, the drama and squabbling of the Submariner's people here, that's a little bit of interesting world building there. Yes, some interesting concepts here. But, okay. For the most part, I found these kind of a slog to read through. So they're very talky, very exposition heavy, and the exposition for the most part is very leaden. Now, I know earlier I was pointing out some of the better scenes, the Thing and the Human Torch and their antagonistic relationship with each other. But for a whole lot of it, it's just very, very boring exposition here. And just so much of it. And, you compare it to a comic that the kids are reading nowadays, and it's I don't know, maybe I'm biased towards the 21st century, or maybe my attention span has been ruined by the internet, but I think the comics that kids are reading nowadays just pop a lot more, with a lot more catchy lines, a lot more snappy dialogue, not just this very boring, leaden exposition. The other thing that makes this kind of a slog to read through is that although the basic concepts are quite well done, once we actually get into the story, the characters do a bunch of things that don't really seem to make a lot of sense. They make dumb decisions. There's, Deus Ex Machinas and things that kind of come out of nowhere, and things that seem not really well thought out, and yeah, a lot of times the logic doesn't really work out. I'm not going to go and nitpick any stories in minute detail, but there is just a whole bunch of, and I mean, I know these were originally written for kids, but yeah, I mean, what can you say? They were originally written for kids and had a kid's logic behind it. Also had a very unsophisticated view of politics of the 20th century. So I think this is true of all the early Marvel comics, is that the Soviet Union is just portrayed as pure evil. Now, I'm not an apologist for the Soviet Union. I don't want to portray them as like a worker's paradise or anything. But I don't, they weren't pure evil. These portrayals of Khrushchev and the Soviet Union, I mean, on the one hand, I guess it's part of the retro quiche appeal of these things, that Cold War chic, where there's all these evil Soviet agents that they have to overcome. But on the other hand, it's just, I don't know, there's an element to which it's tiring, and I think, as much as it does kind of add to the atmosphere of these 1960s comics, I don't think it was a good thing that they were allowed to propagandize to kids to that degree back then. Different times now, maybe? Or I don't know. Are things still just as bad? So yeah. I mean, I read through this whole thing. I didn't stop and bring it back like I did 15 years ago when I was reading it out of the university's library. But I did, to be quite honest, find some of this a bit of a slog. I kind of forced my way through some of these pages rather than purely enjoyed them. Although, now that I'm flipping back and just kind of looking at the pictures and looking at the general story, I'm inclined to think, oh, actually, this looks quite fun. And it does look quite fun when you're flipping through it. But when you actually have to kind of read through all the stuff these are stories that move at a very plodding pace, and really aren't that much fun. And of course, this is partly because of the era. They moved at a slower pace then. And partly, I guess, related to the era. This was, comic books were still considered for kids back then. So this was, they were not writing for 30-year-old men yet. This is when comic books were just purely for kids. Steve Donahue and Michael K. Vaughan talked about some of these issues about 3 years ago in their Epic Wednesday comic book collaboration. I'll link to their videos down below. They weren't reviewing this volume. They were reviewing the Epic collection. But the Epic collection is issues 1 to 18. So it includes several of the issues found here. Michael K. Vaughan really liked it. Steve Donahue was much more critical of it. I always find Steve's opinion interesting because he was there when these came out. So, there's so much mythologizing now about how these were so revolutionary when they came out. But Steve talks about taking them off the news rack and kind of noticing the problems with them even at the time. Steve says that there's not a single good issue in this collection. Michael K. Vaughan loves it. I guess, as you can tell, I'm obviously closer to Steve's opinion on it. But Steve does say it does get better. So not in these issues. But he said once Stan Lee and Jack Kirby figured out what they could do, and once they figured out what kind of audience they were developing, that they were developing some college kids who were reading these, then they were able to go in some really interesting directions with the Fantastic Four. But Steve Donahue says they're not here yet in these issues. I'll have to take his word for it. I haven't read anything past these issues. You can definitely see potential here, which maybe in later issues would get developed into more interesting stories. So I may pick up more Fantastic Four in the future, but I found this a little bit plodding and plotting and very wordy and very kind of heavy with the exposition, and for the most part, very uninspired dialogue. There were a few snappy quips, but there was a whole lot of just plotting dialogue.